Welcome to the Geostrategic Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are so glad to have you with us today as we unpack a stack of sources that, frankly, read like the script of a techno thriller. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want to set the stage exactly where the sources put us. First, it was Venezuela. Now is the U.S. moving on Tehran. A high-stakes ghost plane just went dark over Azerbaijan, and it is officially parked on Iran's northern border. This is the MC-130J Commando II, the world's elite infiltration platform. It flew silent, direct from the UK to Baku, putting U.S. special ops just 700 kilometers from the Iranian capital. With the Night Stalkers already on the ground, the chess pieces are moving. Smash that like button to subscribe to track this shadow war as it unfolds. But I want to hear from you. Is this a masterclass in psychological pressure, or are we looking at the next major extraction mission? Don't hold back. There are no wrong answers here. Drop your theories in the comments. Let's get the debate started.
It is a hell of an opener, I have to admit. But honestly, the sources we're analyzing today actually justify that level of drama. We aren't just looking at a flight map here. We are looking at a very specific, very loud signal being broadcast on a silent frequency.
And that is exactly what we're breaking down today. We are doing a deep dive into this specific movement, the flight of a U.S. Air Force MC-130J Commando II on January 29, 2026. We've got the OSINT flight tracking data, which is fascinating on its own. We've pulled the military capability reports to understand what this machine actually does. And we have some dense, really fascinating geopolitical analysis on the triangle between Azerbaijan, Iran, and the United States.
Right, and our mission is to decode why a single plane flying dark changes the calculus in the Middle East. We need to move beyond the headlines and understand two key concepts our sources keep circling back to: controlled escalation and strategic ambiguity.
Right, because usually when we talk about military buildups, we're talking about aircraft carriers parked in the Gulf or tank battalions moving across Europe. This is different. This feels surgical.
It is. It's the difference between a sledgehammer and a scalpel. And sometimes, the scalpel is infinitely more terrifying to the person on the operating table.
So let's start with the anatomy of the flight itself. What exactly happened on January 29th that triggered all these alerts?
Okay, so if you look at the flight tracking data in the source material, we see a very deliberate path. The aircraft departed from the UK likely RAF Mildenhall or RAF Fairford.
And just to pause there for a second, why those bases specifically? Does it matter where it came from?
Oh, it does. It absolutely does. Those are the primary hubs for U.S. special operations in Europe. Mildenhall is essentially the forward operating base for the 352nd Special Operations Wing. When something leaves from there, it usually means business. It's not a routine cargo run from a logistics hub in Germany.
Okay, so it leaves the Special Ops Hub in the UK, and it flew all the way to Haydar Aliyev International Airport in Baku, Azerbaijan.
Correct. But here's the ghost aspect you mentioned in the intro. The transponders were switched off intermittently.
For those of us who don't track flights for a living, that means it wasn't broadcasting its location to the civilian world for the whole trip, right?
Exactly. Now, in civilian aviation, you never turn that off. It's unsafe. But for a military flight, going dark suggests a tactical movement. The analysis suggests they are designing what they call the operating geometry to avoid politically sensitive airspace while still using NATO infrastructure.
It's interesting, though. They went dark, but we still know they're there. It feels like a peekaboo game.
That is the strategic ambiguity part. They want to be seen, but only when they choose to be seen. If they wanted to be truly invisible, we wouldn't be talking about it. The fact that OSINT open source intelligence accounts picked it up means the U.S. military isn't trying to hide the arrival, just the specific route and profile.
So it limits the visibility of the movement for contingency planning. But what makes this really jump off the page for me is the context. This wasn't just a lonely plane landing on a runway. It feels like they're building something.
No, not at all. Looking at the timeline in the notes, this follows a really distinct pattern of accumulation. Earlier in January 2026, we saw C-17 Globemaster III's arriving.
Heavy haulers.
Exactly. And this one is crucial, AC-130J Ghostriders.
The Ghostriders are the gunships, right? The ones that circle overhead and just rain down fire.
Yes, heavy close air support. But, perhaps most significantly, the sources highlight the presence of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment.
The Night Stalkers. Even if you aren't a military buff, you probably heard that name. Black Hawk Down, the Bin Laden raid. These are the guys.
They're the premier rotary wing aviators in the world. The reports indicate we're seeing assets like MH-60 Blackhawks and MH-47G Chinooks on the ground in Baku.
Okay, so let's look at the Lego set we've assembled here. You've got the big transport planes, the C-17s bringing the gear. You've got the gunships, the AC-130s for protection. You've got the assault helicopters from the Night Stalkers for the grab. And now you have this MC-130J Commando II. Why does that specific combination matter so much?
It represents what defense analysts call a layered power posture. The NC-130J isn't just there to drop off mail or spare parts. It serves as the critical connective tissue for that entire group.
It refuels those helicopters.
Yes, it provides the logistical backbone for low-profile infiltration.
So without the MC-130J, the helicopters are basically tethered to the base?
Precisely. Helicopters have limited range. With MC-130J, those same helicopters can go hundreds of miles further. When you put all these assets together, the Ghostriders for protection, the Night Stalkers for the mission, and the Commando II for the reach, you have a complete package for high-end special operations. This isn't a diplomatic visit. It's an operational footprint.
That is a heavy, heavy signal to send. It feels like they're assembling a machine piece by piece right on the border.
And the MC-130J is the engine that makes that machine mobile.
Let's dig into the machine itself. I think a lot of people hear C-130 and they think of that reliable propeller-driven cargo plane that's been around forever. You see them at air shows.
Yeah?
But the source material is very specific. This is the Commando II. How is this different from the plane-hauling pallets of MREs?
It's night and day. I mean, it shares the same airframe, the shape is the same, but the insides are completely different. The source material describes it as the world's elite infiltration platform.
What are the big differences? What makes it elite?
3 things: infiltration, refueling, and penetration. It's designed specifically to get elite forces into and out of what they call denied territory.
And denied territory is just military speak for places where the enemy really, really doesn't want you to be and has the guns to prove it.
Precisely. And to do that, the Commando II has advanced terrain-following radar.
Explain that for a second. Why is that so vital?
Well, imagine flying at 250 knots in pitch-black darkness, maybe 200 feet off the ground, weaving through a mountain range. You can't see the mountain in front of you with your eyes. The radar sees the terrain and allows the plane to just hug the earth, staying below enemy radar coverage.
That sounds absolutely terrifying.
It requires incredible skill. It also has secure comms and advanced self-protection suites, jammers, decoys that allow it to survive if it gets painted by a missile system.
So it hugs the ground in the dark.
Yes, and crucially, it acts as a gas station in the sky. This is the refueling part. It has pods on the wings to refuel those MH-47 Chinooks and CV-22 Ospreys mid-flight.
This goes back to the reach you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. If you have a helicopter that needs to go 400 miles to pick up a target and come back, it physically can't do that on one tank of gas. It would run out of fuel over the target. The MC-130J waits in the dark, tops them off on the way in, and tops them off on the way out. It extends the action radius deep into hostile territory.
This is where the psychology comes in, right?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about a bomber. If you park a B-52 bomber nearby, you are signaling, I can blow you up. That's blunt force.
Correct. A bomber or a carrier signals deterrence through destruction.
But this plane, this feels more personal.
This plane signals access. It implies the ability to reach specific individuals or locations inside Iran's defenses. It says, we can come to your house, we can take you or something you value, and we can leave. And you might not even know we were there until it's over.
That is terrifyingly specific. It's not a threat to the country's infrastructure. It's a threat to the people running it.
And that brings us to the connection the sources make to Venezuela. This is where the narrative gets really interesting.
Yeah, the Maduro precedent. I hadn't connected these dots until I read the analysis.
It's a critical piece of the puzzle. The sources point to the 2025 operation involving the arrest of Nicolás Maduro.
Right, where U.S. forces effectively extracted a head of state.
Analysts see a framework here. The use of special operations forces in unconventional, leadership-focused missions creates a narrative memory. When this MC-130J lands in Baku, the world, and specifically the leadership in Tehran, remembers what happened in Venezuela. They don't see a cargo plane. They see a capture team.
The sources even mention the online speculation running wild. There are narratives circulating claiming things like, Khamenei will probably join Maduro in a cell in New York.
And look, we have to be clear, that is internet hyperbole. But the effect of that hyperbole on the leadership in Tehran is very real. The sources quote the reaction from Iranian officials, and they sound rattled.
Yeah, I have that quote here. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei called the conflict intrinsic. That's a heavy word.
It is. And his advisors warned that U.S. action is an act of war. They aren't viewing this as a border patrol exercise. They view it as an existential threat to the leadership regime itself.
It creates paranoia.
The analysis uses the term cognitive load. Think about it like a computer processor. If you're running a massive background program, worrying about being snatched in the middle of the night, you have less processing power for everything else.
So instead of projecting power into Lebanon or Yemen, they're looking over their shoulders.
Exactly. It forces Tehran to shift resources. They have to focus on internal security, counterintelligence, and leadership hardening. They have to assume that even their most protected individuals are no longer immune.
So by just parking the plane there, without firing a single shot, you force them to spend money and energy protecting themselves from shadows. It's a tax on their attention span.
That is the essence of psychological warfare.
Let's pivot to the map, because geography is destiny here, and the sources emphasize this heavily. Why Baku? Why Azerbaijan? I mean, I know they're neighbors, but the relationship is complicated.
You have to look at the distances. Baku to Tehran is only about 700 kilometers.
In aviation terms, especially for a plane like the Commando II, that is nothing. That's a short hop.
It's a very short hop. And there's a 700-kilometer border between Azerbaijan and Iran, marked largely by the Aras River. The sources call this a strategic vulnerability for Tehran.
Why a vulnerability? Beyond just being a border they have to watch?
Demographics. There is a massive ethnic Azerbaijani population in northern Iran. Millions of people.
So there's a cultural link across the border.
A strong one. There has always been a history of bilateral mistrust between Tehran and Baku because of this. Tehran worries about separatism. For them, that northern border is a soft underbelly. Having U.S. special ops sitting right on top of that soft underbelly is a nightmare scenario for Iranian defense planners.
But what about Azerbaijan's calculation here? Hosting these ghost planes seems incredibly risky for them. They share a border with Iran. They have Russia breathing down their neck from the north. Why take that risk?
It's a high-wire act. Baku is balancing relations with Russia and Iran, but they are heavily leveraging Western partnerships. Why? Energy security.
They need the West to keep the oil and gas flowing out of the Caspian.
Right. Their economy depends on it. And for the U.S., using Haydar Aliyev International Airport allows for a forward presence without building a permanent U.S. base.
Which is a crucial distinction.
Huge. A permanent base is a red line. That implies permanence, treaties, long-term commitments. It would trigger a diplomatic meltdown with Russia and Iran. But a temporary deployment, a few planes for a training exercise, or contingency planning, that's ambiguous. It preserves diplomatic flexibility.
But, as you noted, the sources highlight the risks. If Iran decides they've had enough and responds.
If Iran strikes Azerbaijani territory to get at these planes, it changes everything. It wouldn't just be a local skirmish.
The sources mention internationalizing the conflict.
Exactly. Azerbaijan has strong ties to Turkey, a NATO member. If Azerbaijan is attacked, you could see a ripple effect that pulls in NATO-aligned actors. It's a very dangerous game for everyone involved.
This leads us to the so what of this deep dive. We've talked about the plane, the location, the history, the risks. But what does this mean for the big picture? The sources use the term controlled escalation.
This is the core strategy. The U.S. is using these shadow operations to exert pressure without crossing the red line into open warfare.
It's aggressive, but it's not war in the legal sense.
Technically, no. The goal is to increase leadership anxiety in Tehran. By compressing the timeline for decision-making during a crisis, the U.S. hopes to force errors or force a stand-down.
It makes them feel like the walls are closing in.
And the ripple effects go far beyond the Caspian Sea. The sources brought up something I hadn't really considered, the Asia-Pacific connection.
Yeah, that surprised me too. Why are defense planners in places like Malaysia or Southeast Asia watching a plane in Baku?
Because it shifts the balance of deterrence globally. First, there's the energy angle. The Caspian is a critical energy corridor. Any instability there hits global markets immediately. Oil prices spike in Tokyo and Singapore if things get hot in Baku.
But it's also about the capability, right?
Yeah, exactly. It shows that modern conflict is about shaping the environment before shots are fired. If the U.S. can demonstrate it can infiltrate the Iranian border, one of the most heavily defended airspaces in the region, it signals to adversaries in the Pacific that denied territory isn't actually denied.
It's a demonstration of capability. It says, if we can do it here, we can do it there.
Precisely. It signals to allies and adversaries alike that the U.S. can project power into the most sensitive areas without needing a massive visible footprint, like an aircraft carrier group. It's leaner, faster, and, frankly, scarier.
It's fascinating how much weight one aircraft can carry. It's not just cargo. It's political weight.
That is the nature of special operations assets. They are low density, there aren't many of them, but they are high demand and high impact.
So to recap what we found in the deep dive today, we have the flight Jan 29, 2026 UK to Baku. We have the ghost profile where they controlled who saw them. We have the night stalkers and the gunships already on the ground forming this hunter-killer package.
And we have this massive psychological game being played with the leadership in Tehran, using the memory of the Venezuela operation as leverage to induce paranoia.
All while Azerbaijan plays the dangerous role of host, caught between the West, Russia, and Iran.
It really redefines what we think of as warfare, doesn't it?
It does. It moves us away from the idea of front lines and tank battles into something much more fluid and much more psychological.
It's warfare in the gray zone.
Okay, let's try to synthesize this for the listener. If you take one thing away from this deep dive, what should it be?
It's that the MC-130J in Baku isn't just a transport flight. It is a psychological weapon utilizing what they call operational art. It signals that in 2026, no one is immune, even behind layers of air defense. It is about proving access.
It's a message delivered at 300 miles per hour with the lights off.
And the receiver of that message, the leadership in Tehran, knows exactly what it means.
That is a chilling thought. And it leads me to one final question for you to mull over as you go about your day. The sources paint a picture of a world where boundaries are porous. If the U.S. can position an infiltration force 700 kilometers from a hostile capital without technically starting a war, does this mean the era of declared wars is over?
That is the billion-dollar question.
Have we replaced open conflict entirely with these shadow campaigns, where the decisive move, the checkmate, happens before the public even knows the game has started?
It certainly looks that way from Baku.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening or watching today. We hope this deep dive gave you a clearer picture of what's happening in the shadows over the Caspian.
Indeed. It's a complex situation, and we'll keep watching the data.
Absolutely. Make sure to check out our other deep dives. We've got plenty more analysis on the way. Until next time.